Now we come to Q&A session. For first round, I would like to pick 3 questions.
Thank you, Dr. Zainal. I think I'll be the first questioner. There are basically 2 questions. One is when you talk about resist secularization, right? You came up with the idea of this alternative normativity, right? So my question is that how do we promote this this alternative normativity? Because I think you didn't explain very well about this particular issue. Secondly, this idea of anti-takfiri law, which is to me is very good, and you quoted about Oman. But correct me if I'm wrong, the mazhab in Oman is Ibadi, right? So they can come up with this kind of law, right? Because it's Ibadi. But it's very difficult for say Sunni country to come up with such a law, because you know this sectarianism or secularization is very rampant in Sunni majority countries, not Shia countries, but Sunni majority countries, especially Saudi Arabia, and now even in Malaysia and Pakistan as well, right? Thank you.
Assalamualaikum and very good evening. I have 2 questions actually. Firstly, I recall back what has been said by Professor Dr. Farid Alatas about actually my question is that when someone come to public and they said that certain community is outside of Islam from their point of view or from their own standard on who should be in or outside of Islam. And then, for example, in this case, it targeted Ahmadiyya community. So, of course, Ahmadiyya's community will feel offended. Can we consider it? Can we consider this as hate speech? My second question is, let's say one day this Ahmadiyya community get into power and they become dominant. They have their own Islamic institution, and they came up with fatwa that Sunni and Shiite is outside of Islam. Is that okay or not? Why not? I would like to suggest that for us to define other community, whether they are outside or inside of Islam, we define it according to how they themselves define whether they are Islam or not. Because of course, when we say that you are not you are not Islam, you are outside of Islam, if they themselves feel that or they perceive themselves as Islam, of course they will feel offended. So how to handle with this? Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. Okay, just a quick question. Do you find that the core arguments for sectarianism, are they sort of similar, or do political entrepreneurs have to adapt these arguments to their local context to their own ends? And if the arguments for sectarianism or sectarianization are similar, is there a common source of it?
Thank you. About the alternative normativity, I think it's the same. I mean, well, there are always avenues. I mean, for different avenues. Actually, the research which I've been doing with Bob Hefner in Indonesia, we are looking at different normativities at the local level. I mean, in different places in Indonesia, and how do they scale up? So they can scale up through education, for example, trying to influence policymakers, and this is exactly the same thing also, which the anti-pluralists also try to do. They try to influence government. They try to. Both. So the scaling up, it can be done, I mean, horizontally. I mean, trying to disseminate the ideas so that more and more people can accept that. But you are probably, I can also say, vertically trying to institutionalize that in government policy, whether central or local governments. And in that sense, I think the pluralists and the anti-pluralists, they compete. Both are trying to influence the government, to influence the society. So it's a matter of competitions. And when I speak about the this is referring, I think, to the this morning's question about the movement in Indonesia, Aksi 212 against Ahok. I think what that shows is the victory of the anti-pluralists scaling up. The question is whether this is sustainable. I mean, whether this will be sustained or not. That's a different question. But it's competition. So that's how I see it. The anti-takfiri regulations. Actually, there's one in Emirates. Yeah, they couch it actually as part of the anti-terrorism law. So actually this afternoon I tried to check that regulation. There are some news story about it, although I have not found the exact regulation. So and also actually you can see like I said earlier, we don't need to use the legal space. We can use the political space. So actually in terms of creating a law like the anti-takfir law, well, I'm not quite sure actually whether that's well, basically any attempt to restrict speech, I think that's always risky. Because that can depend on who holds the power, and then there's interpretations that there can be many different interpretations. So I'm always very cautious in terms of any law, including the anti-takfir law, which restricts speech. What I wanted to say is that even not by creating such kind of law, there's some wide political space you can use to restrict this phenomenon. So, and also actually you can see Risalah Aman. That's actually remarkable. But somehow, I mean, I think, I don't know whether, I'm sure there are representatives from Malaysia, probably, right? Okay, yeah. In Indonesia, there are 3 or 4 representatives, but unfortunately, they don't speak out. I mean, if we have this document, this is a document signed by hundreds of mainstream, non-liberal, traditional, even conservative ulama. And it's clear they are not liberal at all. So this should be a very effective document actually. But unfortunately, yeah, the scaling up is not effective. So yeah, the next question about takfir. Yeah, I think simply saying that a certain group is outside Islam, that's not hate speech. And I think people should be allowed to say that. I mean, to say that because of course I can say in all religion at some point you have to make boundaries. You cannot simply say, I mean, like all religions are the same, etc. Of course, no religions are the same. So there are boundaries, etc. And you can say that this view is beyond the boundary, etc. But and in I think the long tradition, the intellectual history of Islam, there have been differences like that. What is dangerous, I mean, if you say that a certain person is outside Islam, therefore this is murtad, therefore you can kill him. That's incitement to violence. So I think that's the boundary. You cannot say that. I mean, in a civil state. So hate spin is used to explain how differences are used to mobilize people. It's not about the differences itself. It's not about certain group having different views, but how that differences is being manipulated, being used as an instrument to mobilize people against a certain group, and usually this is a small minority groups. So when Ahmadi is dominant, then they will say Sunni or Shia is not Islam. Well, probably. What I can say, of course, that is not nice. Whether in a certain state that's legal or not, that's a different question. I think it's much better if you don't do takfir. But like I said, I don't think making takfir illegal is necessary. Well, I like it in the Emirate, for example, that they make takfir illegal, but this may take place, like for example in Indonesia. I don't think that's going to happen. Many human rights activists probably will go against that type of regulation because it's restricting speech. So again, what is important is not the differences itself. The differences will always be there. The Ahmadi probably would regard other Muslim not as a real or a true Muslim. That's not nice in a diverse society, but it's difficult to say that it is illegal or that people who say that should go to prison. I think that's a different issue. The core argument for sectarianism. Well, I think if you look at the case with the Middle East, I think in general it's the same. In Indonesia, it may use different instruments. It has a different context, different. I mean, like in Indonesia, it's. I mean, there's much more freedom. So there are other instruments with different effectiveness, but the main structure, I think it's the same, and it's conveyed in the term sectarianization. That is, it's a construction. It's a political construction to achieve certain political purposes. You can use in one place the issue of Shia. You can use in other place the issue of Ahmadiyya, and sometimes also, and this is very sad actually, sometimes certain issues like Rohingya is being used is being manipulated politically. This is very sad. I mean, like for example, in Indonesia now, until 2 weeks ago maybe, before the issue of communism came up to the surface, the issue of Rohingya was used to criticize Jokowi, the president, that he didn't do anything, etc. So, and that's crazy, I think. I mean, this is a humanitarian issue, but then people use it as a commodity to achieve certain political purposes or to go against their political enemy. I would not be surprised if in Malaysia probably some groups will also exploit this issue. Because again, when you do that, then the suffering, the plight of the Rohingyas, you forget about that after a certain period. And that's the bad thing about capitalizing on certain religious issues. So I think, yeah, that's my answer. I hope that helps. Thank you.